Here at Colne, we're celebrating our long history. 42 years of making a positive difference and changing lives. At Colne, we want to continue to enable independent living. To achieve this, we want to continue to grow our reputation and to build on our relationships with our partners in the east of England. We want to build on those relationships so we can make a difference, but we also want to engage with new relationships and have new conversations. We want to play our part not only in housing, but in regeneration, social care, health and community investment. We want to thank the contributors of our annual report this year. You'll hear their voices shortly, you'll hear their views, what they think the sector is able to do to address the housing crisis, and their personal thoughts around Colne and what we can do to help with that. We want you to be part of the conversation. You have a whole year of opportunity to have the conversation with us, so please do so.
I think the UK faces some significant challenges, particularly around housing. We've got large social housing and affordable housing waiting lists. Certainly in Colchester, it's between 3,000 and 5,000 at any time. So I think the supply of housing, in particular affordable housing, but also an ageing population, so adult social care and homes that are appropriate for the elderly, are going to be really important as we approach this decade. The affordable housing sector is already changing. We're seeing more houses being built in the affordable housing sector. It's harder on brownfield sites, it's easier on greenfield sites to allow a proportion of housing to be built. But we are seeing houses being built, and some of the smaller providers that are more fleet of foot, providing better value for money, are actually building houses and ensuring that that affordable housing provision is available. Well, Colne Housing is already making a number of the changes that are necessary, being pragmatic, fleet of foot, ensuring that they take a community-based approach. But I think being efficient is one of the key measures, but also looking at building more houses, but also tackling some of the issues around adult social care and an elderly population, and ensuring that there is that accommodation for the elderly that need that support. Well, two of the main issues the UK faces over the next 5 to 10 years. One is housing supply. We have a massive shortage, in particular in East Anglia, a number of people wanting housing, in particular affordable housing and social housing, so that's one issue. The second is an ever-ageing population. By 2020 there'll be an extra 1 million over 70s, and that means we're going to need to tackle accommodation for the elderly and supported living. Well, the housing sector in East Anglia, there's still considerable shortages, and that is only going to continue, which is why it's really important that organisations like Colne continue to build affordable housing and continue to increase the supply, especially around the elderly and around sheltered accommodation, which we're going to see an increased need for over the next 5 to 10 years.
Colne Housing Society has real knowledge and expertise of the communities, the towns, the places where it works. It has a real focus on what it does. And I think what we will see with Colne is that it will explore how they can provide new homes for people in different parts of their area, but at different price points. I think housing associations in the future will be the first place you go to if you're looking for a new home, whether that's a home to buy, a home to rent, a penthouse apartment, because housing associations will increasingly be making an offer to everyone at all parts of the market. And I think the great advantage of organisations like Colne is that because they've been around for so long, they really know and understand the communities and neighbourhoods where they work. They don't just invest and go, they stay there and really become part of the fabric of those communities. One of the great advantages that housing associations have as independent organisations is that they can decide for themselves what is the most appropriate way that they should respond to the challenges that they see. the board, the executive team, the staff, the residents, other stakeholders, they will think through the challenges that they see. They'll build partnerships with local authorities, with private developers. They will use their potential to be creative and imaginative. This is really critical that housing associations like Colne continue, because they have this knowledge and expertise in the places where they work that really is not like anyone else. I think that Colne will, in the future, be building a whole range of different homes, investing in different neighbourhoods. And I think the one thing they need to do better than they're doing now is get out there and tell the story. Because what housing associations do is terrific. They do it, as Colne does, brilliantly, but the rest of us don't know enough about it because they're not telling the story. So crack on, do the work, invest in the homes and the neighbourhoods, and then tell people about the success.
The government are currently pursuing a home ownership agenda, and that is absolutely right. It's perfectly legitimate in terms of the government's policies, but I do think that it alienates a sector of our communities, sector of our population, who are now struggling to actually get into being able to rent affordable housing. And we know, don't we, that actually housing is the bedrock of just about everything else. You're in a house, you know, your educational attainment is better. You're in a house, your employment prospects are better. You're in a house, actually the social cohesion of the family is better. So housing is absolutely critical, I think, to the way in which our communities will look and feel in the next 5 to 10 years. We are not currently building enough affordable houses in East Anglia, and I think that is a real issue for us. Certainly, I think in local authority terms, we've seen homelessness numbers increase quite significantly, and that has a knock-on effect into registered providers who are there to try and pick up some of those homelessness numbers and place them into housing. So for me, I think Colne Housing needs to think quite carefully about how it works with its partners, how it works with other local authorities who do need to look at how we can increase the number of affordable houses available. I think Colne undoubtedly is well positioned at the moment. I do think Colne may well need to consider how it can partner more closely with other organisations and local authorities who are going to look at building affordable housing. I think the only way for us is to build affordable housing outside of what we call the housing revenue account, which is a ring-fenced account for housing purposes. That means that we need to build more houses for sale, we need to build more houses for rent, and more houses for affordable housing, so that those people in our communities who currently are really struggling do have somewhere that they can actually be housed. I think Colne, for me, does a really good job at the moment. I think there are probably two areas I would suggest Colne should consider positioning itself in. One is the management capability that Colne has for other registered providers who perhaps are struggling at the moment. So I think that getting alongside them, looking at how you can provide some of that support to them, might even be managing some of their properties, I think is one area that I would look to expand. And as I say, I think on the other side, it's more about different organisations, local authorities, actually building more affordable housing. And that means, I think, Colne could actually look at partnering with those organisations or authorities to actually help them construct that affordable housing, can actually help them manage that affordable housing, but could also look at how Colne can use its housing knowledge in a wider sense, so that if local authorities in particular are looking at developing housing sites, actually can Colne help those local authorities with sale of houses, with rent at market rents, as well as managing the affordable housing that is on the sites.
The housing sector in East Anglia is hugely affected by London. Therefore, we are seeing increasing house prices as the London effect sort of ripples outwards. The shortage of housing in London is very acute. We're seeing local authorities in London placing people in temporary accommodation increasingly throughout all of our districts in Essex. And also for the east of England, which is a high value area in broad terms compared to the rest of the country, I think we can only see that continuing to happen. But dealing with the extra demand that arises from people who are leaving London, as well as people who already live here, we can barely meet the need from people who are currently here. But as that sort of ripple effect continues, I think we are in for very difficult times ahead. Colne is, I think Colne has to use its advantages and not see them as disadvantages. The danger is that because it's relatively small, it sees that as a drawback. And as we watch organisations merging to form mega providers with over 100,000 homes in their portfolio, an organisation with a relatively small stock can appear to be just a minnow that can achieve nothing. And actually what it can achieve is a lot of local focus, much more flexibility over what it offers. It can enter into agreements that might be a one-off thing that it can do at one local authority level that works locally. It might not work next door even because of differences in the way that rents are paid, benefit system operates, all the sort of vagaries of the system that are so complex. An organisation that's fleet of foot and flexible and willing to work and willing to put themselves out to find out what is needed at a local level has a huge part to play. If it tries to mimic the other organisations with mega stock and take the same sort of attitude of growth at all costs, well, you know, I don't know, we wouldn't really be interested in what the organisation was there for. It wouldn't be fulfilling its function, it wouldn't be doing what it can do. Colne could be an organisation willing to pilot ideas. It could be an organisation that comes to us with things that can be done. Because it is a relatively small organisation, it can be flexible over what it can offer, and it can make a lot of difference at a local level that the bigger organisations are just not interested in providing for us. What we'd like is sort of innovation that can meet a variety of needs. We've always really valued the fact that Colne has become involved in some of the more difficult parts of our housing issues, dealing with the private sector leasing schemes, which some of the bigger organisations just completely abandoned. And they've worked with us over many years to try and find ways to make it work, and that we may have to face up to putting extra subsidy into it to make it work, but we need that conversation, and we're really there to have that sort of conversation with Colne. So we have to have an organisation which is responsive to our needs, and in the past, Colne has been. It has been exactly that. I hope it's still that in the future.
I feel like this is a Groundhog Day. It takes me back to 1970. I'm living again the experience that we had in the early 1970s, when there was a huge housing problem. Going back to what we thought about in the 60s and early 70s, about local people making provision of local housing. That has got to come back. That's the way it has to be done. In those early days, there were small groups of very dedicated people. I'm thinking in Colchester of Bernard Brett, who set up a small housing association to serve the local people who had a particular need. And it was very successful. Colne developed well. We had a very good local relationship in those days with Colchester Borough Council, Malden District Council and tendering. But I tend to feel that the localism of provision has disappeared. What I think is important for the future is that we provide local homes for local people. We've got to go back to those principles. And I've got certain views as to how that might happen, which has developed over the last 2 or 3 years, that we've got to revert to localism. I support entirely the coalition government's provision for localism, and I think we've got to develop on that. The other essential part is the coalition government brought through very important legislation in the Care Act of 2014, where we must get cooperation on housing for needy people, for vulnerable people, especially older people and people with learning disabilities, work together with the social care departments of county councils and those authorities, and also work very closely with the NHS. Well, Colne currently has a role in managing almshouses. You know, going back to my thoughts about these huge housing associations, nobody knows who's behind them. But with almshouse charities, the local trustees who run them know the residents. And there's an easy correlation between the two. And Colne, as a locally based housing association, has the same ethos of knowing its residents and working with them easily. In construction, we need to have new construction, and we need to have almshouses which are homes for life. I mean, it appears to me that government's policy now is strictly based on providing funds for housing to buy. We must not forget the needs that, you know, probably 15% of the population who will never, ever be able to afford to buy.
In my life, it's had a massive impact. I mean, it brought, you know, me and my partner were able to live together, obviously with my daughter. We've now got another daughter, so that allowed us, because the house is big enough. Literally, the area is a great area where we live, and I wasn't expecting to go anywhere like that. Because when you say housing association, some people go, oh, look at that, think about council housing, and you know, it doesn't necessarily have a great image. But I think these guys, you're very relaxed when you see them, very welcoming, and I think that's been really good. The area now, because obviously they helped us majorly with again, the resident association. It's just brought everyone together. I mean, we got new play equipment for the we've got child's play area in the middle of literally in the middle of the estate. So we've got new play equipment for there. Which is fantastic. Literally, we managed to secure funding for that, and that was really a feel-good thing to get out of it. We got a notice board. It sounds quite small, really silly, but literally we can now put everything in there. So that's another way, because obviously we've got the internet. Not everyone has the internet. We go around delivering flyers as well. That's another thing that Colne have helped us, with printers, paper, ink, and It's very basics, but they've given you the, equipment to do different things. So that's really good. yeah, I think Colne has made a major impact in my life and my area.
So thank you for listening. We really hope that you've enjoyed it as much as we've enjoyed making it. I'd like to thank all of the collaborators, my wonderful staff, our residents, and all of our support partners for making this happen. So please don't forget, it is now your time to join the conversation. You can do so on social media or via our website, and remember, it'll be for the rest of this year. Join the conversation and have your say today.